Started. So kind of what to expect from today, just kind of our agenda for the day is I'm going to give you a quick system update, just a few minor updates about how the system's doing and a few other things. Then we're going to do an in-depth overview of loggers benefits. So these are all of the options that your subdivision has to choose from when it comes to loggers coverage and loggers benefits. Then we're going to spend a significant amount of time on number 3, okay? Communicating how to communicate your loggers benefit through every career stage to really help you leverage this benefit to drive home the value of the plan that you are funding through loggers. And then number 4, that's actually for the in-person meetings, would be a discussion topic about recruitment. I have a few things we're going to talk about when it comes to recruitment. If you do have things you want to add or questions, please feel free to type those into the Q&A as we go through it. Okay, quick system update. So generally speaking, loggers is consistently growing. We add a number of political subdivisions every year. So if you didn't know this, loggers is not a mandated system across the state. Each employer that participates in loggers individually adopts loggers coverage on their own. So we're not mandated, but once they're in, they can't exit. So the other side of that is, let's talk about just the financial side of it. Loggers is their preliminary, as of our last June board meeting, we're 96.5% pre-funded. Now, if you don't know anything about pensions, that number probably doesn't mean much to you. So let me explain what it is. Funding level is a metric that pension plans use to measure their ability to pay future benefits. And anytime a pension plan is at 80% or higher, they're considered to be a very strong, financially strong pension plan. Okay. So, when we're thinking about those things in those components, 80% is kind of not necessarily the goal, but that's the bar. And if you're above that, you're in pretty good shape. The goal is always 100%. So loggers is at 96.5% pre-funded. Now, another way to look at this as far as pre-funding goes is, and this is, I'm sure if my actuaries were listening to this webinar, they'd probably roll their eyes at me for explaining it this way. But generally, this is how it kind of would work. If all of our active members currently in the system, so all like 38,000, 39,000 of them, were to no longer be employed at our 835 political subdivisions, and our 835 political subdivisions chose not to hire anybody else. So essentially, local government in the state of Missouri no longer exists. If that happens, we could pay 96.5 cents of every dollar that we owe today. We don't owe every dollar today because, as we'll talk about when we get to eligibility, there's a number of folks that are in their 30s and 40s that aren't eligible to draw this benefit until 55 or 60. So being 96.5% funded means that loggers is a very financially strong pension plan. It puts us in the top 5 to 10 plans in the country of our size as far as funding level goes. So it's a really good, strong metric and a strong, just a strong component to the plan that you already participate in, is that it's a very well-funded plan. We have 835, although it says 30 on here. When I did this presentation, we've added a few since I made the presentation. We have 835 subdivisions across Missouri. We add 10 to 15 new subdivisions every year. It's actually been averaging lately over the last 5, more like 15 to 20 new subdivisions every year. So how that plays is that's just the system growing. But when we play that into the pre-funded level, all those subdivisions are coming in with some level of liabilities. I mean, they may have some prior service that they're covering or not, but it has some level of a dollar amount of liability that's payable in future benefits, and they're bringing those in, and they have no assets in the system. So when they're coming in brand new, they don't have any assets yet. So that plays into that 96.5% pre-funded. So with those folks coming in with liabilities and no assets, we're still at a very high level of funding. And that's just a testament to the system and the plan design that we have that ensures that the funding is very, very strong. Okay. And then finally, let's just talk a little bit about economic impact. So a lot of times people talk about the retirement benefits for the individual, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But a lot of times folks have a hard time getting outside of the individual getting this benefit and thinking about it in terms of the actual economic footprint that pension plans leave on the state. So loggers paid out 2 years ago. This is a couple year old data. 2 years ago, we paid out $356 million in total to all of our retirees, and 33.2 million stayed in the state of Missouri because 93% of our retirees remain in the city, county that they reside in. They remain there after retirement. They don't typically move. So that's $332 million that was pumped into the Missouri economy 1 month at a time through monthly payments of our retirees, but that's every year. Okay, and it only typically goes up, right? So because you have more retirees and cost of living adjustments that are built into that. So the stabilizing component to pension plans to a state economy and a national economy goes a little understated sometimes. So we thought we'd just share that information with you through this webinar. Okay, so now we're going to dig into the weeds. So kind of prepare yourselves, buckle up. We're going to talk about all of the details of the logger's benefit structure. Okay, and the elections that you can choose, some of them that are just already set, some of them that you can change later, and things like that. We're going to go through all of that right at this point. Again, if you do have questions, please feel free to scroll to the bottom of your screen, click on Q&A, type them in. I'll see the questions as they come in, and then as they come in, I'll answer them. It doesn't have to necessarily be related to what we're talking about either. So make sure that you get those questions and type them in, and I'll answer them. Okay. So who is eligible for loggers coverage? So eligibility, your employer, when they joined loggers, which may have been back in the late 60s, early 70s, for some of you, and some of you it was sooner than that, of course, but when your employer joined, they elected a number of hours that a individual must work in order to be eligible for loggers coverage. And that number of hours was 1,500, 1,250, or 1,000 hours annually. Any position working at or above the annual hours elected at your subdivision must be covered by the system. Okay. Not optional, not opt in, opt out. If they're working the hours, they're mandated to be in the system and thereby mandated to be covered under all of the benefit provisions you have elected, including employee contributions. Okay. Once the bigger picture of just eligibility hours is established, then as well, your board, when they joined, and they can do this at a later date as well, but when they joined, elected for coverage of departments. So they will have to, they had to elect at a minimum a general department, but they could also have elected a police department, fire department, and they can now elect a public safety department. Okay. So general, police, fire, public safety, they would elect those when you join. They can be added after you join. So we'll talk about that when we get to public safety. We'll talk a little bit about that provision here in a minute. But at a minimum, every subdivision must cover a general department. So we couldn't be approached by a subdivision that says we only want to cover our police department. We don't want to cover anyone else. Well, the law requires that at a minimum, a general department must also be covered. Okay. Members of your governing body, they may individually elect coverage if your subdivision meets these eligibility requirements. First, they have to be paid a wage, and that wage is subject to Social Security. Okay, if they are paid a wage and it's subject to Social Security, and your employer has at least 10 covered loggers members, okay, they have at least 10 covered loggers members, and they're paid a wage that is subject to Social Security, then they can individually opt in to loggers coverage, and the city would be required to make contributions on their behalf. Okay, so cover a minimum of a department, starting with annual hours is the bigger picture for that's everybody. Then election of department, and then the members of governing body. So how do the benefits work? So there's two primary types of retirement plans that employers in the U.S. have to choose from, if they choose anything at all, for providing for their employees. There's defined contribution plans. This is not what loggers is, but we'll explain it really quick. Defined contribution plan in the private sector is called a 401k, and the public sector is called a 457 plan. And generally what these are is they're account balance plans. They allow you to accumulate assets in an account. And then when you're ready to retire, you're drawing down on the assets of that account in hopes that the funds that you have saved will last you for the remainder of your life. Okay, but there's lots of uncertainty with defined contribution plans. The markets, making good investment returns, and saving enough are saving enough and never touching it are three of the big risks of a defined contribution plan. Whereas defined benefit plans, which is what Loggers is, defined benefit plans, what they do is they pay guaranteed monthly benefits to their members based on their working career. So the longer they work and the more they make, the larger their benefit is. All of Loggers benefits calculate using this formula that's in the lower right. We take a benefit program. This is a multiplier that your employer chooses, ranging between 1 and 2.5%. Multiply that times how much you make. Then we multiply that times how long you work. And that gives you your monthly benefit that's payable for the remainder of your life. Okay. So when we get to the elections that your employer makes, one of the elections that they make is the multiplier, and it ranges between 1 and 2.5%. For Social Security participating subdivisions, the highest you can go is 2%. Okay. If you're a non-Social Security subdivision or department, you can also opt in for a 2.5% multiplier. Okay. So 1 to 2%, non-Social Security, 2.5 is an option. Okay. The higher the multiplier, the larger the benefit, of course, but as well, the larger the benefit, the higher the cost, right? So we'll talk a little bit about changing benefits here in a bit. Okay. But generally speaking, this is how a multiplier would work out. The higher your multiplier is, the larger percentage of income that's going to be replaced by Loggers when someone retires. Okay. So all of our benefits, again, we calculate taking a multiplier times average salary times service credit. Okay. Or as I like to call it, how much you make and how long you work. All right. But, so that's all of them. But if you remove out the salary component of that calculation, then we can actually illustrate how much of a person's income, a percentage, like what percent of a person's income, pre-retirement income, would they be eligible to draw under Loggers. So if you had a 1% program and you work 20 years, then you would get 20% of your pre-retirement income. Okay. If you have a 1.5, it's 30%. If you've got the 2%, it's 40%. So you can see that the multiplier does have a significant impact on the amount a person will take home from the Loggers system. In addition, why this percentage is important is financial planners in the industry say you need to replace somewhere around 75 to 85% of your pre-retirement income to maintain your same standard of living throughout retirement. Okay. So you can easily determine what percentage you're going to get from Loggers by taking your multiplier times the number of years a person thinks they're going to work in public service, or that they have worked in public service. Let's say you've got the 1.5% program and you've worked 20 years, then you're getting 30%. So you need to fill the gap of 50% of your pre-retirement income with other sources, including Social Security and savings. So that's kind of the component that as an HR person, you need to understand is just because you have Loggers doesn't necessarily mean that the employees shouldn't be trying to save a little bit on the side. However, since they have Loggers, the amount that they need to save is likely significantly less because they have this guaranteed benefit from us. Okay. So these examples that are on the screen are called life programs. So it's in 0.25% increments up to 2%. And then there's the 2.5, which is that non-Social Security option. Okay. Those are all the life programs. What it does is it pays the same multiplier times salary times service for the lifetime of the member. There are also programs called life and temporary programs. Some of you may have one of these. What a life and temporary program does is it pays an additional temporary benefit from retirement age until the age of 65. And once the member reaches age 65, that temporary benefit goes away. Now, it may be a 62 plan. So LT plans used to be LT 62 plans. Then they were changed to LT 65 plans. So you may still have an old 62 plan. We have a few employers that still do. Okay. But it's going to stop at whatever the program says. If it's a 62 plan, then the temporary benefit stops at 62. If it's a 65 plan, then the temporary benefit ends at 65. Okay. So the most popular option I think I've seen is the LT8. So what that does is that temporary benefit is 0.5% in this case. It's 0.5% times salary times service from retirement age until the age of 65, which ends up equaling a total multiplier of 2% times salary times years of service from retirement age until the age of 65. Or in this example, that's 40% of their pre-retirement income to the age of 65. And then once they reach the age of 65, we take 1.5% times salary times years of service. And that gives us a dollar amount, or in this example, 30% of their pre-retirement income from retirement age until the age of 65. Let's see, we got a question. Tina, we're going to talk about benefit changes here in a minute. Since you've been in the system for 3 years, let's keep in mind a couple of things. Number one, you elect your level of benefits. By you, I mean your governing body chooses what level of benefits you have, and they can determine whether or not you go up or down in benefits. So as far as, if you've only been in loggers for 3 years, and I'm not real sure what your subdivision is, but depending on how your subdivision elected prior service and a number of other things, it can have an impact on the benefit. But doing an upgrade, it's retroactive, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit in a few slides. And if that didn't fully answer what you were really asking, just ask again, and I'll keep trying to provide some more clarity. Okay, so final average salary. What we're going to do with final average salary is, this is an election that your subdivision makes as well. So they elect whether or not you have an LT plan or a life plan. And let's see. So they elect whether or not you have an LT plan or a life plan, and they okay, we're going to have to put this on pause because I forgot to plug in my laptop. Give me a hot. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that, guys. All right, so the way final average salary is going to work is your employer is going to choose whether or not it is a 5-year average or a 3-year average. Okay, and if it's a 5-year average, what we're going to do is we're going to look back 120 months. Regardless if it's a 3-year or a 5-year, we're always looking back 120 months from a person's retirement date. Okay, and from that 120-month window, we will take the highest consecutive 60 months from that last 120. We'll average them out. And in this example, it averages out to $2,963. Okay. If you have a 3-year average, then what we're going to do is we're going to still use that same 120-month window, but we're going to use the highest consecutive 3 years, the highest consecutive 36 months of loggers credited service. And we're going to add it all together, divide it by 36, and produce that average of $3,058. Okay. Your employer chooses whether or not you have a 5-year or a 3-year. Okay. And they can change that. So they can change your multiplier. They can change your average salary. Employee contributions. This is another component to the benefit structure that your employer can change. The two that we just talked about, though, okay, so benefit program and final average salary, are the two that have the largest impact on the amount a member can take home from our system. Okay. The other two we're about to talk about have zero impact on the dollar amount. None. Okay. Even employee contributions. So if you require employees to contribute more, but you don't change your multiplier, then their benefit amount doesn't change, or their benefit accrual doesn't change. All right. So employee contributions, as an employer, you can choose to require 0%, 2%, 4%, or 6% of gross pay for employees to contribute. So they can contribute 0, 2, 4, or 6%. If you have them contribute, what they're going to do is they're going to assist in the funding of the benefit. Okay. So if your cost of benefits to fund the level of benefits you're choosing with your benefit program, your average salary, and retirement eligibility is 16% of payroll, and you require 0% employee contributions, well, then the employer is going to pay the full 16%. Okay. If you require 4% employee contributions for that same level of benefits, the employees would contribute 4%, and the employer would contribute the remaining cost. Now, generally speaking, in this example, if we're using it just like this, it's 12%, but actually the cost is not an even 4%. Okay, the cost reduction for employee contributions isn't an even 2, 4, or 6. There's a little bit of offset there because we assume some turnover will likely happen. And since employee contributions made by a member, any contribution made by a member to the system is guaranteed to be paid back to them, there's an assumption built in there that there's going to be a portion of the group that's going to turn over and take their contributions with them when they leave. So it's not an even 2, 4, or 6, but generally this is kind of how that would look. Okay. Just a real quick statistic for you to kind of be thinking about. Employers that require contributions. There's 40% of our employers require contributions. The other 60% do not. But as a percentage of membership, so individual members of the 38,000 folks that are members, only 26% of the members contribute. Okay. So that reflects a couple things. One, we're adding 15 to 20 new subdivisions every year. Typically, they're coming in with some level of employee contributions. So they're going to keep that employer percentage at a higher level. As well, the majority of the employers that we're adding aren't a significant size. They're moderate size. So they're, as far as, from the members that they're adding, they're not going to have that large of an impact on the percentage of members that are contributing. So that just kind of gives you an idea, is that 40% of the employers require it, but only 26% of our members actually contribute. Okay, let's see. Got a question. Donna, can employees choose to contribute additional funds? No, and they don't want to, because contributing additional funds doesn't add to their benefits. So for example, if you had a 1.5% multiplier and a 3-year average salary, we're going to take 1.5% times average salary times years of service credit. If the person contributed 0%, it's going to be 1.5% times average salary times years of service. If they contribute 6%, it's still going to be 1.5% times average salary times years of service. So contributing more does not add to their benefit. If they're looking for ways that they want to contribute to add to their financial security in the future, and you may want to consider setting up a 457 plan, not necessarily doing a match, but allowing it to be withheld from their paychecks, so that they're not seeing the money hit their checking account. In other words, they can't spend it. It is kind of how that process works. If they're looking for ways to add more to their retirement, then the avenue to do that, a great supplement for that, is a 457 plan type plan that you can accumulate assets, and they can choose whether or not they want to contribute to it or not on their own. So final election. So we've talked about the benefit program election. We talked about average salary. We talked about employee contributions. The next is eligibility. So there's basically 2 different options that a subdivision would have to choose from for eligibility. One of those, but there's one other component to eligibility that's not an election. It's just system-wide. Okay, so the first hurdle to eligibility is vesting. Vesting is a term created by the financial industry that means guaranteed to receive funds. Okay, and so an individual, in order to be guaranteed to receive funds from loggers, must become vested first. Vesting in the loggers system is 60 months of service. Upon completing their 60th month of service within the system, they are guaranteed to receive benefit from us. Okay. That 60 months doesn't have to occur with the same employer. It can occur with multiple. All right. But vesting 60 months, that's the first hurdle. The next hurdle is reaching retirement age. Okay. The 2 options that an employer has to choose from are normal retirement and rule of 80. Okay. Normal retirement is age 60 for general employees and age 55 for police officers, firefighters, and public safety if it's elected at the subdivision. So age 60 for general employees and 55 for police officers, firefighters, and public safety where elected. Under normal retirement, there is an early retirement provision that allows for all the groups of employees to retire up to 5 years earlier than their normal retirement age. That's 55 for general and 50 for police, fire, and public safety. However, that early retirement under this normal retirement provision is reduced. It's reduced by 6% per year on a prorated basis, or 0.5% for every month that they are younger than 60 or 55. Okay. So that's what the early retirement option is. Now, that early retirement option, generally, that reduction, what it's designed to do is designed to just spread out the same value of a person's benefit over a longer period of time, so that by the time they pass away, in theory, that they will have received the same dollars from us. So it's not necessarily a penalty. We're just spreading out the value over a longer period of time. Okay. The other option that an employer has to choose from is called the Rule of 80. Okay, the Rule of 80 allows for employees to retire earlier than their normal retirement age when the sum of their age and service credit equals 80. Okay, I'm not sure if I have a slide on this one. Let's check. Can't remember. I do. Look at that. So the best example of the Rule of 80 is someone who started at the age of 20 at a logger subdivision that has Rule of 80, and they continue working there for 30 years. Okay. And so 30 years down the road, they're age 50. So you add the service credit plus their age of 50, that equals 80. This person can retire at the age of 50 with no reductions to their benefit. Okay. So they can start drawing benefit at age 50 upon termination of employment. Okay. And anywhere in between. But there's a couple of groups of folks that the Rule of 80 doesn't help, doesn't help them retire any earlier. And that's police officers, firefighters, and public safety that employed at the subdivision at the age of 30 or older, or general employees who employed at the subdivision at age 40 or older. Okay, so let's use the 40 or older example. That's the bottom line. As you can see there, the Rule of 80 age for that 40-year-old individual is age 60, which is also their normal retirement age. Okay, so if an employer has the Rule of 80, and a person does the math and their Rule of 80 age puts them in excess of their normal retirement age, then in that case, that individual can retire with a normal retirement at age 60 or 55. So again, I'll repeat exactly what Rule of 80 does. It allows an individual to retire earlier than 60 or 55 when the sum of their age and service credit equals 80. Earlier than, not later than. Okay. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so that's all about the kind of the details and in the weeds. Let's talk about the flexibility. In other words, what changes can be made and how do those have, and what kind of impacts do they have? So you're, as a subdivision, you can change benefit levels no more frequently than once every 2 years. Okay, you can change each one of these individual components no more frequently than once every 2 years. So you can change the benefit program up or down. Okay. You can change the final average salary up or down. You can add contributions or remove contributions or reduce contributions. Okay. You can change your retirement age from normal retirement to Rule of 80 and back. So those four that we just covered are what I would call more of the common benefit changes, where they're pretty straightforward. Not a whole lot of complication to them. It's retroactive, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But those are the more common types of enhancements. As well, you can move up in a multiplier and back down in a multiplier, and back and forth if you want. I will tell you that there's not a whole lot of advantage of once you've moved up to move back down, but we'll cover that in a minute. But the one component that's on this screen that is viewed as a benefit change is something a bit more permanent. So do you guys remember way back when, like probably 15 slides ago, we talked about once you add a department? Okay. So, and I talked about when the employer joins, they add these departments and then they can add them at a later date. Well, the other component that you may have also heard me say was that once an entity joins loggers, they cannot terminate coverage. Okay, so that same applies to adding departments. So if you add a department, you will forever have that department. That's how adding a public safety department is different. So if you don't know what the public safety department thing is, Back in 2018, we passed original legislation, and that's stated here in that third class county, which is no longer valid. But I'll explain. So back in 2018, we passed a law that would allow, the legislature passed a law that allows for EMS personnel, jailers and dispatchers to be listed in a public safety department for the purposes of an age 55 normal retirement. Okay. Back in 18, when it passed, it was only for third class counties. This last legislative session, the legislature passed and cleaned it up and removed that third class county requirement. So now that all subdivisions that participate in loggers that employ these types of individuals may now add a public safety department for that age 55 if they like. Okay. But it's permanent. You add a public safety department. It's not like, hey, we're going to upgrade our public safety to 55 and then 10 years later, nope. No, it's always. Okay. You add it and it's that way in perpetuity. There will be an increased cost, and you may have an impact in your general department as well. And let me explain. So there's going to be an increased cost. The reason there's an increased cost for public safety is because now these folks can now retire 5 years earlier than expected. Okay. So in other words, you're having to fund it a little bit faster because now they can draw the benefit earlier. Okay. But the general department may also have an impact because maybe your public safety department, especially if it's just dispatchers, they may have a whole lot of young folks and they've had high turnover. So then when you remove that out of your general department, and then maybe your other general department includes like public works and administration, which typically doesn't have as much turnover, you may have some increased costs in your general department because of the seniority and the service credit that's now the general department once it's been removed, once the public safety folks have been removed. It's complicated and definitely an actuarial movement. But here's generally how we do the public safety deal right now. If you want to explore adding a public safety department, what we're having to do is we are sending in valuation requests quarterly. We're not doing them on a as needed or as sent basis, which is what we would do for any of the other components. So if you're changing something else, it'll be sent like at the end of the week is typically when I send all those requests. But public safety, we're holding them because of demand. So we have a significant amount of demand at the moment, and we're trying not to overwhelm staff that has to actually onboard the public safety side of it. And then also trying not to overwhelm the actuary for the actuarial work that needs to be completed. But if you're interested, what you'll have to do is you'll have to complete a personnel data form. You'll send it back to me. I'll send it on to the actuary when we send it in that quarterly batch. It'll take them around 4 to 6 weeks to complete. And then once complete, I'll send back to you with all of your next steps and also be there to help you with any interpretation of the valuation information, because it can be confusing sometimes. So, but that's generally how the process goes. You got to get a data form and evaluation, and then there's some other back end part of the process if you decide you want to move forward, but we'll cross that bridge when you get there. Okay. So upgrades, what do upgrades do and how do they work? So when you can change those benefits every 2 years, a benefit upgrade is retroactive. So that means all service of the active employees rendered at the lower level is now enhanced to the higher level. So if you had an employee that was hired on January 1 of 90 and you changed benefits on January 1 of 2015, all the service credit from 90 to 2015 is retroactively enhanced. And then all the service credit after the benefit change is also at that higher level. Okay. So he has 30 years of total service here. Without the upgrade, he'd be looking at $900 a month. With the upgrade, he's looking at $1,125 a month. That's a total difference over a 20-year retirement without cost of living adjustments of approximately $54,000. Okay. So pretty significant. And that's just going from up another 0.25%. A number of subdivisions across the state lately have been doing a little bit more than that. Not suggesting that's what you should or shouldn't do, but that's what I've been seeing. The trends are folks are trying to find as many possible ways to retain current good employees and recruit folks to come and work for them, because it's hard to get folks to come and do public service. It's hard for folks to come and work, period. In public service, it's even harder. Okay. So let's talk about some advantages of increasing the multiplier, and I will talk about some disadvantages as well. So the advantages of increasing the multiplier is it does impact all active employees equally. Now, you may have some younger employees that say, well, Joe's been here for 35 years. He's going to feel the impact of this he's going to feel a more immediate impact than what I will. And it's like, you could potentially make that argument, sure. But if you work 35 years at the city and they don't change benefits and it's the same higher multiplier and you have the same salary, your benefits are going to be identical. Okay. So that argument sometimes happens, but not that frequently. Okay. It does impact active employees equally. It improves employees' ability to retire at the appropriate times. So a lot of folks think about loggers in terms of just retirement benefit, but there's a component to, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in detail here in a minute, that we're more of a workforce management tool where we're trying to recruit and retain and exit folks at the right time. So since we're trying to exit those folks at the right time, getting folks to retire at an appropriate time is really, really important. Okay. I do have a question that came in. I'll cover these last two bullets and then we'll go through that question. Okay. It also helps to recruit workers by improving the employer's workforce competitiveness. Now, this is kind of something a bit more significant that I've seen over the last 12 months. And this is kind of going like hotcakes, where I will get a call from an employer in a region and they're like, hey, we're looking at doing public safety. Let's just say that's what they said. Okay. Hey, we're looking at doing a public safety. Send me all the information. Okay, great. And I will literally get a phone call or an email an hour later from their neighboring community that says, hey, we're looking at doing public safety. So it's becoming a very competitive workplace, especially in larger metro areas where we're seeing some of this happen. But it does help recruit workers because now you're going to have a better benefit program and a better benefit that this employee could potentially rely upon later on in life. And it does help retain workers, obviously, especially if you had some folks that have been there a little while and you're like, hey, we want to reward you. We can't necessarily give you a massive pay increase. We're going to try and get your pay where it needs to be. But what we really want to do is be able to give you the ability to exit the workforce at the right times and do so with some financial security. And this is how we're doing that. Okay. So that's basically the four things that it does. Tina, answer me this. Who do you work for? If you can put that in the question, I can probably answer your question. So Tina has a question just about have someone who's going to be retiring soon. Got it. Okay. So Tina, being a soil and water conservation district, the way that your prior service worked because of your prior retirement plan is because of that prior retirement plan, we only gave service prior to the joining date for vesting purposes, not for benefits. Okay. So that gentleman who's thinking about retiring, he's going to have 3 years of service credit with us unless he individually purchased service on his own. If he did individually purchase service on his own, then he will have a different benefit amount. I would suggest he calls us directly and that you're not having to interface with him and give him any sort of misinformation. So I would suggest he calls us. We give him a benefit estimate. We explain to him how these things work. But yeah, if he's been with the Soil and Water Conservation District for in excess of 5 years, he's vested, and then but his benefit service didn't start until the join date. So if you've been there for 3 years, then he's going to have your 1.5% multiplier, which is what you all have, times your average salary, times his 3 years of service credit. So it's not going to be much, but he will get something. And yeah, we might want to visit afterwards as well if he's got more details, but I would suggest he calls us directly, or you and him both call if he needs you to be on the phone or help him and assist him through that process. That would be my suggestion. So that's the benefits or advantages of increasing the multiplier. the disadvantages. So there are disadvantages for increasing a multiplier, and they're mostly all financial, right? So it's like the advantages are benefit, retention, exit. The disadvantages are risks, is basically what we're getting at. So by doing an enhancement, you will take on an additional unfunded liability. So we retroactively enhance all of the benefit for all that service credit for your active employees. Okay. And by doing so, there's a liability created because you've been funding it at a lower level, and now all of a sudden the benefit's at a higher level for all the service. So we amortize that liability over a 20-year closed period, and it is included in your regular contributions to loggers. So it's not something that you're going to pay in addition to, but it is a liability. It's a liability in its truest form. It's going to show up on your balance sheet. So just be aware of that. Future decreases in your benefit multiplier will not erase the liability associated with the upgrade. So this is remember when I said, we'll talk about going up and then going back. Doesn't always have the effect that you think it will. So we have employers that have, I don't know if they've necessarily done this, but they've definitely explored doing things like this, where they'll be like, you know what, we're going to go ahead and increase benefits to the 1.75% program. And then after about 5 years, when the people we want to retire have retired, then we're going to go ahead and go back down to the 1.25% program. And the reality is that when they downgrade back, the liability for the upgrade is still there, because downgrades aren't retroactive. They're future service only. So if you upgrade to the higher level and then downgrade to a lower level, basically what's going to happen is and I've seen this happen where we've had employers, unless they're going from the highest level to the lowest level, but if they're looking at going from the highest level to, say, like the mid-level program, typically their cost doesn't go down, like hardly at all. But what happens is there's portions of your contribution rate, so one portion that's funding future service and the other that's funding prior service. Okay. And what happens is that the portion of your benefit or the portion of your cost that's funding that prior service is larger and the future service is lower. Okay. So that you're essentially paying down the liability faster, but your cost doesn't necessarily go down. Okay. So just be thinking about that. And then also, if you're a smaller subdivision, as a smaller subdivision, you should certainly consider this next bullet. Okay. So higher than normal retirement rates in the years immediately following a benefit multiplier upgrade may cause additional increases to loggers' contribution rates beyond the initial rate increase. So this is part of the analysis that I do when I receive a request. So when I receive a request from a subdivision, our actuary has provided us with a list of all of our subdivisions, and that list has all of the employers that all of our employers, and it has all the departments, and then it has listed how many employees are eligible for retirement in the next 2 years, and then as a percentage of the total. And if that percentage is in excess of 20%, I have the actuary run additional analysis of, if these individuals were to retire exactly at their eligibility after the upgrade, what's the additional impact that this employer could anticipate? And we include that in the evaluation email. Okay. But generally what happens is if you have folks that retire, and if you're a smaller subdivision, we have an assumption for the number of folks that will retire. And that assumption is around, and that assumption is around 15%. Is 15% of your group is going to retire on their date of eligibility. And then it's like trails off as folks get older. Okay. But if you have 6 employees and 3 of them retire, well, that's 50%. We assume 15. Okay. That we're going to call that an actuarial loss. So that's going to create some upward pressure on your contribution rate just by the nature of the retirements occurring. Plus we transfer assets from your trust into the benefit reserve fund, even if the assets necessary to fund the benefit aren't there. So if you did an enhancement and you don't have the assets in the trust yet, we're transferring what's needed. So we could be actually drawing your assets into the negative, making the liability grow larger and your costs go up significantly year over year. That's worst case scenario. Okay. And that's why I provide the additional analysis, so that you understand, if you take this on and your folks retire, this is your additional financial risk that you need to be considering. Okay. So there are some risks to doing enhancements, but of course, do those risks outweigh the benefits? That's for you to determine. So again, downgrades only affect future service. So if a downgrade occurs, then what's going to happen is all the service that an employee has earned up to the date of the benefit change will maintain at that higher level, and all the service going forward would be at the lower level. So in this example, we do one calculation for the 25 years at the 1.25, which gives us the $937.50, and then we do another calculation for the 5 years at the 1%, which gives us that $150, and that comes out to $1,087.50. Okay. Now, downgrades do have a negative impact on members' benefits, but the folks who have the most to lose in a downgrade are your earlier and mid-career employees that have a significant amount of time to work before they're eligible to draw benefit. So the longer amount of service that they have to accrue under that lower benefit program, the larger impact that they have. Someone who's near retirement, a downgrade is not going to have that large of an impact on their benefit, because all of their service that they've earned up to that point at the higher level will maintain at that higher level. Okay. Let's see. I've got a question, I think. Nope, I don't. I just forgot to mark it off here. All right. Again, if you do have questions, make sure that you're going to the bottom of the screen. There's a menu there. It's Q&A. Click on it, type them in. Okay. So again, you can change your benefits every year. There is a formal process that you have to go through, but I think there's some things that aren't necessarily on this screen that as a HR professional, you should certainly consider before making a change. Okay. One of the things I'd strongly encourage every subdivision that's on this webinar to consider before making a change is employee engagement. So I know some of you might be thinking, I'm not sure I want to open up that can of worms. Okay. But when I say employee engagement, it could be simple as a survey. Okay. So one thing that an employer in the East region of the state did, and they engaged me on this, and I was very involved in that process. And I was really, really thrilled with the way they did their process. Is first thing they did, and this was before they even engaged me. The first thing they did is they asked their employees in a survey, and I think there was a number of questions involved, and it was an employee survey of some kind. But one of the questions that they asked in this survey was, are you willing to contribute funds from your paycheck to increase your logger's benefit? Something along those lines. Yes or no. Okay. And I think they had like 75% that said yes. Okay. So they were like, okay, well, now let's explore it. Let's actually dig in and figure out what can we actually afford as a city. So then from there, that's when they started engaging us, and we can run internal estimates that aren't part of this official process. That I can run as many as you want. Now try to limit it, because obviously if we run a bunch, there is opportunity for human error when we're running those, because it's a manual process for us. It's a data entry process, but there is a possibility for human error. So if we do a bunch, maybe try to limit it to like 10 or 15. But we can run all these different estimates. And what they did was they basically had us run a bunch of estimates, and they had an idea, a ballpark of what they could afford in their budget. They were like, okay, we can afford probably around 1.5% to 2% increased cost in our loggers cost, and 1.5% to 2% of gross payroll is what they thought they could afford. So now let's figure out what level of benefits we could potentially upgrade to with a 4% employee contribution, and trying to get into that 1.5% to 2% of gross payroll range. And they were able to identify 2 different programs. After they identified the 2 programs that they could afford, that's when they had me come in and speak to their employees. And it was mandatory. Like everybody had to come in and listen, because they were going to be doing this change, and they wanted every person to hear directly from loggers how this change could impact them. And what they did is they had me present 2 different options. It was, okay, option 1, this is what the city's considering. Option 2, this is what the city's considering. And I talked about how it would impact them personally and all those things. Okay. So we went through all of those details. And then after that presentation was up, after I did those mandatory meetings, they they sent out a survey to employees, like almost immediately after. It was like the next day. And then after that survey went out, it asked the same question again. Are you willing to contribute to loggers to increase your benefit? Yes or no? And then they asked the question of they asked if you are or aren't, what level of benefits would be your preference? And a significant majority said that, yes, I'm willing to contribute and I want option A. And then that's what they went with. And then they began the formal process at that time. Okay. Got another question here. Roger, I'll get to it in just a sec. Let me get through these four formal parts of the process. Then Roger, I'll answer your question. Okay. So to change benefit levels, the formal process that aren't part of the stuff we just talked about is you have to request a supplemental actuarial valuation from loggers. You get one free per logger's fiscal year. Our fiscal year begins in July, ends in June. Okay. Then after you receive the valuation, it usually takes around 4 to 6 weeks to complete. Once you receive it, you have to make it available for public view for 45 calendar days. At a minimum, this should be posted in your board minutes because that is the official record of your organization. But there's other ways to open it for public view, as you may or may not know, public notice, newspaper ad, however you want to do it. But a minimum, your board minutes. Then after the valuation has been made public information for 45 days, you can pass a resolution or ordinance adopting the change. Okay, so you pass the resolution or ordinance adopting the change, and we will send you sample verbiage for both the 45-day period and the resolution or ordinance. Okay, you pass it, send it back. We have to have the copy of that resolution or ordinance, just a photocopy, not an original, to the logger's office within 10 days of it passing. If it's in excess of 10 days of its passing, it's no longer valid for our purposes. You'd have to pass a new one. Okay, got two questions. We'll go with Roger first. First question was about retirement. So if an employee wishes to retire on April 1st and they wish to work to the last day of March, does the fact that they get paid in March, paid for March and April, impact April 1 retirement date? It doesn't impact their April 1 retirement date, but we may actually have to do a recertification of their benefit and adjust their benefit in May. But we can still pay them on April 1st. And then will March be considered? So yeah, March is going to be considered in it. Like I said, we'd have to, the second part was, is that wage in March going to be included for average salary purposes? And yeah, it will be, but we can just adjust that in the May benefit. That's also why when we talk about the partial lump sum, Roger, which is one of the options that folks have, this is the reason why we pay it 90 days later and we don't pay it on day one, because you may have a wage that gets reported that may have an impact on a person's average salary, may have an impact on, and then therefore their monthly benefit, and then therefore the partial lump sum. So, and the partial lump sum is a one-time payment, whereas a monthly payment, we can always just adjust and say, hey, we owed you a little bit for April, and then here's your adjusted May benefit, and then move forward from there. Okay. And let's see, I've got Angel here. So why would an employer choose the L12 and not 80 and out? Well, here's the deal with 80 and out. 80 and out isn't just an early retirement provision. It's a retention provision. But why an employer chooses what benefit levels they have or don't have is going to be entirely based on what their goals are. If they're looking for a recruitment and retention tool, and they're possibly looking to try and get some younger folks, then they may want to think about doing a younger retirement age under the rule of 80, so that those folks might stick around because they don't have to work as long to draw this benefit. But 80 and out is one of those things where an employer may not choose 80 and out because they may feel like their employees are working beyond the age of 60 already. So why would you have an early retirement option under the rule of 80 if folks are still quitting at 62 or 65? There's a whole lot of reasons why an employer would elect one thing versus the other. The L12, by the way, is a really good benefit program. It's the second highest benefit program you can have in our system. So what it sounds like to me is it sounds like the employer wants to still provide a good financial benefit, but maybe they don't feel like the rule of 80 would be useful. That's just me trying to read into the, the thoughts of what your governing body would be. Okay. Okay. Now let's see, what time do we got? Okay. We're right at about the time I would expect we'd be at. So communicating loggers benefits at every career stage. So your loggers benefit, your pension plan that you provide through loggers is probably your single best workforce management tool that you have at your disposal. It is designed to specifically do 4 functions. Okay. It's designed to attract quality workers. Okay. And a lot of these things, when I talk about it's designed to do that, that comes back to our chartering documents. And when this organization was created back in the 60s, and they were looking for individuals to come and work in local government in Missouri, and they were trying to attract quality workers to do that. And that's why they created loggers. So some facts when we're talking recruitment. It's now 830 plus political subdivisions in Missouri partner with loggers for their retirement plan needs. So if you think about political subdivision wise, those that are eligible for loggers coverage, there's approximately 1,200 in the state of Missouri, and we have 835 that are covered in loggers. So we're 3/4 of the way there. Okay, as far as who of all the eligible subdivisions that could potentially join. Now, this is one that's really interesting because a lot of times we're also trying to recruit folks from the private sector, straight out of college, whatever it may be. And so this is just interesting. So 74% of local government workers in the US participate in a defined benefit retirement plan, like loggers. So 3/4. Okay. Contrast that to only 48% of private sector workers are eligible for any retirement plan through their employer. So that means that 52% of Americans work for employers that don't provide any kind of retirement benefit at all. So they're left with saving on their own and Social Security. That's it. And you, as a political subdivision that participates in loggers, you have something that doesn't require them to save money, doesn't require them to make investment decisions. The choice is, how long are they going to work in public service? And if they work long enough, they're going to get guaranteed benefits that can sustain them for the remainder of their life. Okay. So pretty significant contrast. So when you're talking at the recruitment phase, so whether you're at a job fair, whether you're trying to just do a job posting, there's some tools that you have at your disposal that Loggers provides that you can utilize to help you drive home just how valuable this benefit is for you and for them. Okay. First is Loggers' new recruitment webpage. So this came about from the listening session 2 or 3 years ago in the St. Louis areas where we first started to hear it. But then when we started to mention it to the other areas, they were like, yeah, that's a great idea. I've been kind of thinking we need to do something like that. So from that came this webpage. It's mologgers.org/join-the-loggers-community. I would suggest you utilize that link in your job posting. So when you say that you have loggers retirement, that it's linked to this, because people don't understand, unless they've worked in public sector employment before, they don't understand what loggers retirement means. And they don't fully understand just how significant that is for their financial future. Okay. So utilize that link and use it as much as you want. If you have any suggestions for what should be on that page after using it for a while, please feel free to send those suggestions to us. We are open to changes on any of these sorts of things, because at the end of the day, we aren't the experts in the recruitment field. You all are. We're just trying to help you. Okay. So when you're also, doing recruitment, maybe some ways to communicate your benefits are like this. Our retirement plan provides secure lifetime income in retirement. You could also use our retirement plan provides you with a larger benefit the longer you work for us. It's always going up. If you're communicating with a millennial or Gen Z who doesn't necessarily like the word retirement because they don't think it's a reality for them, maybe what you could do is instead, let's use that first one and we can substitute some words. And it just says, Loggers provides secure income when you leave the workforce. I didn't say retirement, but it said the same thing. You could also say loggers on that second bullet, loggers will provide you with a larger benefit the longer you work for us. It's always going up. It's always going up is something that's in especially the last 8 months. If they have any understanding of what's going on in the economy and in the markets, if they had any sort of savings in the markets, that's going to be pretty important, because they're going to be having seen their 401k balances do a whole lot of roller coaster riding the last quarter or two. Okay. Name us in your job ads. And when you name us, link us to the site that we're providing. And don't forget to utilize social media. Okay. So this is just some examples of what's on that site. This is the homepage. This is just right there at the beginning. And it's just why work for a loggers employer. It talks about who loggers is generally, and then what kind of benefits we provide. When you scroll down, it's very high level. It's just, not all retirement plans are created equal. Loggers members enjoy this peace of mind. We provide the guaranteed income protected from market downturns, and we provide disability and survivor benefits. How does it work? Kind of gives them a general understanding of how a benefit grows over time. And if they want to know more, they can click on View Summary Benefits and read more. Then we show them what the total value of that benefit could potentially be based on our average benefit amount, which is $1,478. Of course, if someone works longer, those amounts are larger, right? So the longer someone works, the larger their benefit is. Okay, but it also just really drives home just that value of the benefit and the replacement of income that they'd be looking at. Protecting loved ones. If you're recruiting public safety, police or fire, or any other public safety role, that's going to be important to them. Disability and survivor benefits is going to be very, very important to them. And then we kind of evolve out of the benefit communication side of it, and we talk about what public service is, because public service is the opportunity for an individual to make an impact on their community every day. So we talk about making that difference. Then we talk about what local government heroes look like. And this is a video from, excuse me, from our local government hero award that we give out every year. We give it out at our annual meeting. And what it is it's nominated by their peers, and it's folks that are going above and beyond the call of duty of local government. But this is actually Dan Burns, who was a mechanic. He's now retired, but he was a mechanic at Battlefield Fire Protection District. And his job was like hydraulics and diesel mechanic, but he did everything else too. It's like when we were there, they had an AV issue, and he climbed up in the ceiling and fixed it. And then also they had an issue with a generator of some kind. So then he had to get in there and work in the generator and all this. And he was literally the definition of jack of all trades. And he saved the district such unbelievable amounts of money by him being able to learn and just take on anything and always being willing to take on more. So it really showcases what local government looks like. And a lot of times the folks you're trying to hire are very similar to the type of person that Dan was, or is, was as an active member. He's still living, and he's retired. Okay. And then at the bottom of the page, you've got just some additional follow-ups of peace of mind of all markets, security, and then the partnerships that matter. So when we're talking recruitment, there's a number of different ways that you can go about this. This, I'm not the expert in this. This is just some trends that folks are using. And I think we're seeing these trends shift even further towards online job ads. Because even in 2018, the 10-year trend for job postings was using an online job ad. And I think that's probably higher than 84% these days. But one thing I think you might want to consider, because, with loggers being a retention tool, hopefully you've retained some of your good employees. And if you have, and they have someone that might potentially be willing to come and work in local government and would be a good fit, and isn't necessarily working hand in hand with their friend, that employee might have a good bench of folks that could come and serve your community and do so very, very well. So you might want to consider using employee referral and even an incentive for employee referrals as well. Okay. So the competitive advantages, this is a couple things that just generally speaking, as a government employer, you probably know these things. One, you may or may not. The other, I'm pretty sure you probably know this, but From government's competitive advantages have tended to be usually government jobs tend to lead private sector in retirement benefits, healthcare, and paid time off, or work-life balance, whatever you want to call it. Okay. So you got to leverage those things, because we know that in public sector, you can't pay what the private sector is going to pay, but the private sector isn't going to provide folks with retirement benefits. Unlikely they're going to have any sort of healthcare coverage. If it is, it's going to be very, very minimal. And the paid time off is probably something that wouldn't necessarily be a top priority of a number of private sector jobs. In addition, the one thing that government, especially local government, can lead in is mission and purpose. So the younger generations, millennials and Gen Zs, when they're entering the workforce, there's plenty of studies out there that say that they care about fulfillment and they care about making a difference. Okay. They're drawn to employers that make a difference in society. Well, what better way to make a difference in society than having a daily impact on the community that you live in? And whether you're working just in the billing side of a utilities, you're still having an impact. Is when the citizens are calling and they have a positive experience with you, that's making an impact. Or if you're a police officer or firefighter, or if you work for the water department and you're digging up ditches for water main, whatever it is, every one of those jobs has a direct impact on your community. So utilize that, because today's day and age, lots of other studies out there are showing that today's day and age in the job market, we have to sell it. It's no longer, we got a job and now you have to sell yourself to us. It's much more of a two-way street these days, where we actually have to sell the job to the individual and determine if that person is the right person for us. So that's, if you're trying to sell your mission and purpose, because that's something that local government has, and when you're employed in local government, you get to utilize that and be a part of that on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so once you get them in the door, you've gotten through all of the interviews and everything else, and you've hired them. Okay, once they've been hired, they will receive a welcome letter, an actual paper letter to their physical address, sent to them with a benefit explanation. In addition, at enrollment, there is a field on the enrollment field. There's a field on the enrollment form, the online form that you do on Eclipse, that asks for an email address. Okay. So the reason we ask for an email address at the time of hire is so that we can put them into the new enrollment email series, where they get about 8 emails over about a 6.5, 7 month period. It's about every 3 weeks. And it's just a nice little reinforcement of the value of the benefit that they're getting through your subdivision. Okay. That email address, we prefer it be personal, but when we're talking new enrollment, it can be work too. I don't have a strong preference one way or the other. So that as long as as long as they're actually getting the email and opening it. I will tell you that this is something relatively new. We've been doing the new enrollment email series for a little over a year now. And it is probably, as far as open rate is concerned, one of the most popular emails that we send. On average, our open rates for our emails are around 35, 40%. These emails are being opened at a rate of 75%. So 3/4 of the folks that I'm sending this email to are opening these emails, all of them. That's pretty significant. And it's also gives you an idea that they're at least getting exposure to the value of this benefit that you're paying for in your funding. Okay. Also, give the employee a new custom handout. So if you would have attended an in-person meeting, you'd have one in your packet. I don't have one for you. If you want one, reach out to me after the webinar and we will send you one. Okay. But we have custom handouts that we provide for our subdivisions that are custom to your benefit levels, what you're providing. Okay. It's not limited to just new hires, but it's a great piece to give to a new hire. So if some of you are giving a member handbook at the time of hire, I would strongly suggest that you don't do that. And here's primarily the reason why. It's 58 pages long, and you're handing it to potentially a millennial or Generation Z who statistically won't read more than 7 lines in a text message. So you're going to give them 52 pages or 58 pages of information, and they aren't going to read it. So you're better off giving them a custom handout and then also getting them in that new enrollment series. And if they want to know more, they have the opportunity to learn more through that new enrollment email series on our website. Okay. Okay. I'll get you one. I'll get you one, Jeanette. So if anybody else on the webinar wants a custom handout, make sure you let me know before the end, and I'll make sure to remind you at the end. Okay. How are we doing on time? Okay. So hiring a new employee, I'm not going to go into too much detail about this. If you have access to Eclipse, we do a monthly reporting webinar it's every other first Tuesday. So we have one in September, and then we'll have another one in November that goes through all of the details about enrollments. It goes through all of the details about what needs to be done through enrollment and all of that. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that just for the sake of our current time frame. And folks are asking questions, and that's great. So we're pushing over a little bit on time. So we've attracted the quality worker, and then we're incentivizing them to stay. So we're talking about the mid-career folks. Okay. So the method that you utilize when we're talking to try and retain folks, the communication method is very similar. Okay. It's not that much different, aside from you probably want to mention vesting. So when you're explaining those benefits, you probably want to say something like, you're guaranteed to receive a benefit from loggers after 5 years with the loggers employer. So in other words, you're guaranteed to get it once you've been in the system for 5 years. And also the always going up. Your loggers benefit will grow larger the longer you work for a loggers employer. So the longer you work, the more you get. Okay. Donna wants one. Amanda wants one. Crystal wants one. And Marion wants one. Okay. I'll get them for you. I promise. And I see raised hands. If you are raising your hand to get a custom handout, the software doesn't track. There you go. Got it. Yes, Kate, I'll get it for you. If you're raising your hand for it, then, and Amy, just so you know, when we were just on site, you should have copies of that custom handout. If you don't have any, I'll send you some more. It's the same custom handout that Jenny used when they were on site with you. Oh my goodness. Okay. Give me a hot second to get through all these. Okay. Let's see, St. Joe, Kirksville, Angel wants one, Holly wants one, Centralia wants one. Oh my gosh, you guys just keep on. Should I just send it to everybody? Should that be what we do? Oh, Joyce, Public Water Supply District number 1 of what county? We have like 65 water districts. There we go. Okay. And the reason I got to go through and clear these up is if anyone has a question, I still need to be able to, to see those questions come in. Okay. All right. So again, the tools available for retention, use that custom employee handout. It's a great resource for you. The worksheet on the back. So there's a front page and there's a back page. It's kind of got some blanks in it for someone to fill out and individually complete. It allows them to understand just the total value of the benefit they're receiving from us. And like if they were to live a certain number of years in retirement, they would get X dollars. The member handbook is a really good in-depth resource. So it's not a bad resource. It's just not necessarily something you want to hand to a new hire. But someone who's in their mid-career and maybe has some questions about like disability benefits or purchasing service, or even they want to know more about payment options and application process and cost of living adjustments, all that's in there. So it's a great resource. It's just a lot of information. Okay. Another great couple resources that are are available to you and one that's just going to happen. One, member annual statements. We mail those to every member at their mailing address that we have on file. If they don't have a valid mailing address on file, they don't get one. Okay, so we do run it through the Postal Service to make sure it's a valid mailing address and ensure that if there's a forwarded address and things like that. But if they don't have a mailing address listed, or we don't have a way of knowing what that primary mailing address is, they're not going to get an annual statement mailed to them. They can call us and get an extra if they'd like. Webinars, of course, you know about this one, but we do about 4 to 5 webinars a month. I will tell you that we're probably looking at reeling those back just a tad to more like 3 to 4. And that has a little bit to do with attendance. So I feel like we've probably saturated the market a little bit too much post the pandemic, just because of folks' appetite for virtual. And now we're going to start reeling that back a tad because our attendance at our webinars has not been as good as we would expect. So still going to be a good amount of topics and everything will be covered. We just probably won't be doing 5 or 6 a month. On-site presentations. So the loggers lunch break. Those of you that have been on this on the webinar who've had a loggers lunch break, I'm sure you probably found it to be very valuable. Some of you have scheduled one already. I saw a couple names that looked familiar that I've been talking to. If you haven't scheduled a loggers lunch break, let me explain to you what they are. They're specifically designed for early and mid-career employees. We buy lunch for up to 70 folks. By we, I mean loggers will buy lunch for up to 70 employees. We really want the employees that are in that session to be folks that have 10 years or less of service credit. And I know that's like, you feel like you might be isolating your folks that are near retirement and they might get, but we're really trying to drive home, this is the value of the benefit. And we don't talk a whole lot about some of the details that someone close to retirement would care about. Okay. And so we spend time on things like vesting, value of benefit, the paycheck value of the benefit, and how loggers fits in to someone's financial plan. And that's pretty much it. And we spend about 45 minutes total on it. We also run a trivia contest throughout the session. So we're actually handing out prizes at the end for those that actually participate and win. There's top 3. So really, really great resource. If you'd like to have a lunch break, don't type it into the Q&A until the end, but I will remind you, don't type it in until we get to the end. But I'll remind you, the reason I'm doing that is because if anybody has actual questions about what we're talking about, I want to be able to field through those. Okay. And then management meetings. So if you have, whether it's regular management meetings, or if it's something you want to schedule special for your folks, we'll come in and train your managers on how to properly communicate their loggers benefits, because at the end of the day, your frontline supervisors are the front line on retention or exit, whichever that may be. They are the reason why folks potentially stay or leave, or they might be the reason why someone could stay. And if they don't know how to properly communicate this financial benefit, which is the best retention tool you probably have at your disposal, then they're not properly equipped, right? So we can come and train them as well if it's something you're interested in. And then of course we are doing those new hire email series. So when we talk about showing value, this is one of the ways we do it on the lunch break presentation. What I'll do is I will actually pull up your organization's average salary. And then I'll use your benefit multiplier and then 25 years of service. And then I'll illustrate what the total amount and an individual could expect to receive based on those and based on those data points if they were to live 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, or 35 years into retirement, because that's what those numbers at the bottom represent, is years lived in retirement. So based on a $50,000 average salary, 25 years of service, and a 1.5 multiplier, if an individual lived 25 years in retirement, loggers would have paid them $468,750 in total, 1 month at a time, but in total. And then the other part that I do on a lunch break presentation, which really drops jaws, I'm not going to illustrate it on this presentation, but we do it on the lunch break, is I will take that 25-year number and I'll say, let's imagine you worked for a subdivision that didn't have loggers, and all you had was the ability to save on your own. So if all you had to do was you had to save it all on your own, how much would you need to save out of your paycheck from hire to retire to replace that same $468,750 over a 25-year career? And typically it's somewhere around a little under 20% up to 33%, depending on level of benefits and salaries. And that usually drops significant jaws. A lot of employees are like, whoa, yeah, that's right. And you're not going to get something like that in the private sector. For that $1 more an hour, you're leaving this on the table. And that has an impact on retention and morale and things like that. So Julie, I assume that you want a custom handout, and Erica as well with Benton County. That's going to be my assumption. And also, Jeanette, we'll send you something when. Okay, done. Sorry, I'm going through this. Jeanette, I'll have either myself or someone from my team will reach out to you about doing some lunch breaks. We've done some at Columbia in the past, back when Jackie was still there. But we're happy to come back and do some on site, on location, not necessarily hosted at City Hall. It's one of the better parts about the lunch break is we can do them pretty much anywhere. We got to have kind of a wall to project on, but we can bring our own equipment and an extension cord and anything, and it doesn't really matter the conditions that we're in. Like I've gone to, for example, Jeanette, I did a presentation at your solid waste facility. I did one at your road maintenance or I believe it was vehicle maintenance facility, huge facility. And I've done one at City Hall and a few other things. So, that's the other part of the lunch break is trying to do them where the folks work day to day is really, really effective. Oh. Okay, so this is just some administrative side. Again, keep in mind, we do have a monthly reporting webinar that goes into detail about these. So we'll choose to kind of skip on those just because we're running out of time today. So we've talked about attracting quality workers. We've talked about incentivizing them to stay during their most productive years. Now we need to talk about the dignified exit, because that's what the system's designed to do: attract a quality worker, incentivize them to stay and provide the dignified exit from the workforce. Okay, so the exit is what a lot of folks focus on because we're a retirement plan, so retirement benefits. So when explaining benefits to employees, use the following to help them prepare. Okay, if there's someone that doesn't want to go to well, just these are the tools. Okay. The member handbook, of course, there is a section called near retirement, and it has the application process and payment options in detail in that section. Okay. That they could go through and read. They can also go to the Loggers website and read the same content. But I would also suggest promoting Loggers pre-retirement seminars. We have one in every region of the state at a minimum. So we typically try to have one in the Northeast and one in the Northwest, just because attendance in those regions aren't necessarily the highest. But then in some of the larger metropolitan areas, we usually have 2 or 3 a year. Okay. And so they are available both in person regionally and virtually. So we do a virtual pre-retirement seminar twice a month. And those are at varying times. There's 8 o'clock. I think we've done one over lunch. I think we've done one. We definitely do them from like 1 to 3. And then we definitely do evening ones from 6 to 8:30. All great opportunities for folks to learn. And it's the same presentation in person or virtual. But we understand that there are a significant chunk of our membership that just doesn't want to learn online, and that's fine by us. So we'll be happy to continue to provide an in-person opportunity for those that don't want to learn virtually. So when we talk about that, all the other resources, one of the things to really hone in on, a couple things here, is the benefit estimates. So the difference between a benefit estimate and a benefit statement. Benefit statement is just something that's automatically generated, and it doesn't include all of the different payment options. A benefit estimate is based on a specified date given by the member, and it includes all of their different options for payment. So it's much more detailed and much more relevant to someone nearing retirement. Webinars. So we offer those virtual seminars, of course, but if someone can't sit through a 2-hour webinar, they just don't have time, because that's about how long the virtual seminars go, then they should go to maybe some of the more abbreviated webinars that we have of the application process and payment options and after retirement. And those, because those are usually around 35 to 45 minutes versus the 2 hours long. It's more short and sweet. And of course, the on-site presentation. We can come on site and do a pre-retirement seminar as well. If you want to tag team and do a lunch break, I just did one in Crestwood yesterday where I did a seminar in the morning, and then I did a Loggers lunch break over lunch. Okay, and we can do it that way, or you can do a loggers lunch break over lunch and then do a retirement seminar in the afternoon. However you want to do it. We can do breakfast for the lunch break. It's just however we want to slice this up, and have us there for trying to interface with all of your employees. We can make that work. Okay, so just a few administrative sides of things from the application side of things. You probably know this, but we have to have the application a minimum of 30 to 90 days before their first desired benefit payment. We call that an effective date, and it's a first of a month. Okay. The benefit contact at the time of application will receive an urgent certification on Eclipse. Okay. Please complete accurately and promptly. The reason that we need that completed is because you are certifying that that person was employed from X date to X date, and also certifying that their salaries are accurate, because their benefit is going to be based on this certification. Okay. So if the wage data is inaccurate, then their benefit might be affected, and we don't want to have any sort of negative or any wrong. We want it to be accurate. That's the key. Okay. And then once you complete that certification, the employee will receive a packet with all of their payment option details, their tax information, direct deposit form. And at this point, there's no requirement for you to be involved in that process. Now, I know that some employers, that the HR folks, that the employees just kind of rely on the HR folks to help them through this process, but it's not required. And my two cents on that is, if you're a little bit too involved, it might be construed that you're giving advice by the employee. And of course, that's a risk that you may not want to be taking on. Okay. And then of course, when someone retires, make sure you do complete the termination on the monthly report, and when it happens, not when they don't have wages left. Okay. Phyllis, when we're scheduled to be there, I'm thinking you're probably scheduled with Jenny, as far as I think. Just make sure you reach out to her and ask her to bring that extra stuff with her, and we'll be happy to bring it. Absolutely. Sorry, not trying to keep everybody else out of the discussion, but Phyllis has a lunch break scheduled coming up in September, and she asked for us to bring some additional materials. So if we need to bring additional materials, we're happy to do that. But keep in mind, member handbooks, information overload. So I would suggest giving every employee a custom handout and having a stash of member handbooks for those that want more information, and not just give it to them. Because if you just give it to them, there's a good chunk of them that aren't going to read it. It's going to end up either in a file that's never going to get read, or it's going to end up in the trash. Crystal, yeah, so we have a custom handout for your employee benefits. I'll add you to my list to send you one. But we don't have a specific recruitment one yet. The plan is to actually have a recruitment brochure handout that you'll be able to use during a recruitment process, not necessarily the interview, but actually like the job fair. So one step earlier. That's the goal. Don't know when that's actually going to happen, but it is on our radar. Okay. Fair material would be great. Yes. Yeah. We know that's one of the things that you guys have been asking for. And Crystal, don't forget, when earlier on, and maybe you came in a little late, we do have a website that is specific for recruitment. It's mologgers.org, and it's join-the-loggers-community. You could also just go to our website and search that real quick to get the web link if you want. But that's on there as well, and you can use that at your job fair as well. Okay. Tina, I'll reach back out to you at the end. Okay, let's see. Let's advance the slides here. Okay, we've attracted the quality worker. We've incentivized them to stay during their most productive years. We talked about how the system's going to provide the exit and how you communicate with them when you provide that exit. But here's the full circle. Okay, and this is what is so important about workforce management. Okay, and generally having a defined benefit plan that does specifically this. It attracts quality workers and incentivizes them to stay, provides a dignified exit. By providing that dignified exit, it keeps the lines of promotion open. Okay. by keeping the lines of promotion open, that attracts quality workers, because a new employee may want to come into an organization that they at least have a path to move vertical or up or throughout the organization. Okay. And that's really important. So for example, like I know when my boss's eligible retirement date is. Now, whether that's when he retires is up to him, of course, but I know when it is. And that kind of attracts me to sticking around, because maybe someday I want his job. I don't know. But from a young employee perspective, knowing that there is a path to move up in an organization motivates me to work really hard. And that's really what the defined benefit plan structure is designed to do. It's designed to attract the quality worker to an organization that has the churning by keeping the lines of promotion open. And the lines of promotion open are because we're providing the dignified exit, and that dignified exit happens because there's a financial benefit that incentivizes folks to stay and grows as they continue to work. So it's cyclical both ways, right? But lines of promotion open are really, really important to young and eager employees that you may be trying to hire. All right. Final couple slides, and then we are done for today. I'm sorry I went over on the time I said I would. But let's go through a few things. The additional tools and resources that you have available to you. So printed, again, custom benefits handout. We'll work on getting those to you probably in the next, I'd say 3 to 5 business days would be our goal. Member handbooks. Of course, those are a great resource. Just keep in mind that those do have a lot of information in them. And if someone's looking for just kind of a high level thing, that custom handout does wonders for that. Member annual statements, again, mailed every year. They're mailed in the end of the first quarter. So that generally the folks are going to get them in the end of March, beginning of April. And member newsletters. We do send one paper member newsletter with their annual statement. And then all members receive a update from our board, or an update about our board meetings. So that was, sorry, something outside happened, kind of distracted me. But they receive an email newsletter after every single board meeting to give them an update of what happened at the meeting, and then a few other things. Okay. And they also receive monthly event newsletters as well of all the upcoming events. Online resources, of course, our website. Probably one of the better parts about the benefit communication on our website has to be the fact that they don't have to download a PDF to learn things. They can learn things on the site. It's all web content, so they can view it on their phone. They can view it on a computer, and they don't have to download this PDF and try and find it. Okay, that's probably one of the better advantages of it from a benefit communication perspective. Of course, we have videos out there. There's webinars, including the virtual pre-retirement seminars. My Loggers, which is the online member account. It's a great resource for members, especially those that are nearing retirement. We have our blog, and we're on social media. Those are all great online resources for any level of whether they're early, middle, or late career. But then there's the in-person opportunities, which I think is really an opportunity that a lot of our folks don't quite realize the capacity that Loggers has from providing an on-site in-person meeting. Okay. We've been sending out requests for folks, and then we get a few here and there that trickle in, 10 or 15. So let me explain to you all the things that we can, if we have availability, all the things that we can accommodate. If you have an employee benefits fair and it's in person, and you want us to attend, we can attend that as long as we have availability. We're happy to attend that. Of course, you have Loggers lunch break. We can host one or multiple of those on an annual basis, especially if you're a larger subdivision. Limited again to about 70 people per visit is for the lunch side of things. But if you were to provide the lunch, we could come as many times as you want. On-site pre-retirement seminars. If you have a group of folks that are getting ready to exit and they're ready to retire and they need some education and they're not willing to either go learn virtually or go to a in-person regional seminar, and they're okay with learning on site, I could come on site, or someone from my team can do that as well. Employee presentations. So that's just a general overview. So if you have like a standard staff meeting that you all have once a month or once a quarter, and you want loggers to come in and give a presentation at that staff meeting, we can do that. Management staff presentations, we talked about this. This is training them on how to properly communicate it. And board presentations. So if your board has questions about their loggers benefit, has questions about the cost, is looking to make changes, whatever it is, we can come and accommodate that. Regional, okay, pre-retirement seminars, at least one in every region. Employer rate meetings happen in November. That's usually done by our chief financial officer and our executive director, giving you an update on the finances and the funding of the system. HR meetings, those just ended. This is the last one of them from the virtual side of things. Those HR meetings are typically in June or July. I will tell you that the employer rate meetings and HR meetings, we're thinking about figuring out ways to potentially change these, combine them. We're not sure yet exactly what we're going to do. For now, we're probably going to continue on the same course and maybe make a change in 24. And then, of course, the annual meeting. The annual meeting is probably one of the better ways for you to learn and hear updates about your loggers benefit. As in-depth as you possibly could be. But the big thing about the annual meeting is the purpose of the meeting. Purpose of the meeting is electing our board of trustees. That's the reason that we have the meeting. It's statute requires that we have the meeting. So there's 2 voting delegates that a subdivision can send to the annual meeting to participate in board elections. One's a member delegate. That member delegate is will be electing the member trustee who's an active member of the system. They'll be electing a member trustee, let's put it that way, who's an active member in the system. And then there's the employer delegate, who should be a governing body member. If a governing body member can't come, then the governing body member can the entire governing body. If someone from that governing body can't attend, they can appoint a staff person to come in their capacity, but it should be a governing body member if at all possible. Okay, so you get the employer delegate's going to vote for the employer trustee who's not an active member of the system and is a representative of a governing body. So those are the 2 voting delegates that employers can send. You can also send non-voting attendees who don't vote in the elections, but can come and learn all of the updates and hear all of the education, because it's a jam-packed 2 days full of education and information to learn about your system. And then finally, the other tool that you have is the Certified Loggers Administrator. So this is a tool that we launched back in 2019. And then it did kind of get lost during the pandemic because we have some in-person requirements for this. So we're working on a recertification process for those of you that have already completed it. If you have not completed it, here's what it is. It's going to further your knowledge of loggers. It's going to give you a more well-rounded understanding of the plan. It can be completed mostly online. And if you signed up today, you could get credit for today's meeting. It's typically, I'd like to say that for an HR meeting, I'd really like for you to be in person. So the in-person requirements are, unless you were part of the group in Kirksville that we actually had to cancel that meeting due to lack of attendance, we won't be giving credit for today's meeting because it's virtual. We want you to come in person. So if you can't, so the other in-person requirement, it's either attending an HR meeting or attending an employer rate meeting or the annual meeting, one of those 3. Okay. But it doesn't mean you're going to be the expert, nor would there be an expectation that you would be. Okay. That's logger staff job. Okay. It's our job to be the expert about the plan and be able to help you through that process, but it will give you a much better understanding of your benefits. So that's all I have. I ran over. I know some folks already had to leave, and that's perfectly fine. If you've got to go, thanks for coming. I really appreciate you sticking around. I'm going to go through and answer the questions that I have. And then also, if you have an interest in the loggers lunch break, put it into the Q&A right now. So if you want me to start scheduling things on site, for us to come and do a loggers lunch break or an on-site pre-retirement seminar or management meeting, put it into the Q&A right now. And then I will be sure to have myself or someone from my team reach out to you. Okay. I'm going to read through these questions real quick, so bear with me. And then we'll get going here. So Tina, the deal is with yours is the lion's share of subdivisions when we're talking about calculation of benefit for service credit, the lion's share of organizations don't have the same sort of prior service setup that you do. So soil and water conservation districts had a plan that was similar in purpose that was in place, and the way that they had to go about doing this was with a 0% prior service option. So that's why individuals were allowed to purchase service using their prior funds if they wanted. But from the lion's share of our subdivisions, all 835 of them, not all of them, and I'd say even the majority of the ones that are on this webinar are likely to not fall in your category. So when we develop presentations, we try to do it as general as possible and not get too specific so that we're not confusing a number of other folks. I hear you loud and clear that it is confusing for that, because it's not necessarily from date of affiliation, because some subdivisions cover all their prior service in the system as if employees were hired from day one of hire, they were in loggers. So the way that service credit works is unique in your case, but not necessarily unique for the entire system. And I will get you a handout. Yeah, so I will be sending the slide deck. It won't be immediately. It'll be about 3 to 5 days, and more than likely, it'll be that with the video and potentially a custom employee handout as well. And again, allow about 3 to 5 business days to get that done, because we have to generate all those handouts and get the recording on a web cloud so that we can send you a link and all the technical things that we still got to do with it. But we'll get it to you. Okay, let's see. Heather, you'd like to schedule a lunch break for City of Sedalia. I've been dealing a little bit with Shannon as well. So do you want me to reach out to Shannon, or would you like me to coordinate it with you? Donna, I'll get you a handout, and the booklets for your employees. Let's keep in mind, again, not necessarily the greatest resource of just sending it folks a member handbook, unless you need it just as a resource for folks that need more information. I'll send them to you, but just kind of use caution when handing out that member handbook. Debbie, I'll get you on the list. Let's see. And yep, I believe, Marion, I have you on the calendar, but I will double check. Yep, Cindy, we'll get you on the list. Custom employee handout. Yep. Okay, we'll get you. Okay, reach out to me about the potential scenarios for benefit changes. We can run those scenarios for you, and we can kind of go from there. Okay, I'll schedule a Shannon, Heather. All right, Angel, we'll get Texas County added. Okay. Yeah, JJ, I hope we can get to the fair as well. Your fair is always one of my favorites to go to when I have a chance to hit it. All right, well, that's all that I have. Don't see any other questions coming in. So I do appreciate everybody's time today, and I appreciate y'all sticking around for a little bit over the time I was scheduled to go. If you do have any questions, whether it's about benefit changes, whether it's about anything else, please feel free to reach out, call me directly or anybody here at Loggers. And we'd be happy to help with any question that you all have. It's our job to make sure that we get those questions answered. So, but without any other additional questions, I do appreciate everyone's time today, and I hope that you all have a great rest of your week.